Hello everyone, good afternoon. Today I am going to take you the concept called as post-colonial literature. So why do we learn post-colonial literature? Have you ever thought about it? Because it is just to make us familiarize or to make us understand what is colonial rule and the impact which the colonial rule left over there in the colonies. That's why we learn post-colonial literature. Now we'll see what is the concept of post-colonial literature and we'll do it in a detailed manner. The term colonialism is derived from the Roman word colonia. Colonia means form or a settlement. When we get this answer, a form, colonia means a form or settlement. What is the meaning of a settlement? Settlement means, usually in settlement, generally people migrate from one place to the another place and they search for their own place and settle there. That is called as a settlement. Even after their settlement in the particular place, they used to have a keep connectivity in their particular parent land or a mother country. That is called as a settlement. Here we have settlement means people move in larger groups from one place to the another place to settle down. After the settlement, usually they will have a close contact to the parent as well as a mother country. So that is called as the settlement. After they settle in a particular place, we have the two kinds of people. Who are the two kinds of people? One is called as a settlers and the second one is called as a inhabitants, or we can call it as a real natives. Okay, we used to, who is called as a settlers? Why we call them as a settlers? Because they have migrated from one place and they search for their suitable place and they make colonies there. That's why we can call it as a settlers. Next we have the inhabitants. Who is called as a inhabitants? Inhabitants are the real owners of the land. So that's why we call, they have lot of money and they have everything. They have their own country, culture, everything. So that's why we can call it as a inhabitants. So we use different terminologies to describe these settlers as well as the inhabitants. What are the terms that we can use it for the settlers? We can use colonial power, colonizers, next we have the colonialists. These are the three different terms we can use it for the settlers. Next for inhabitants, what are the terminologies that we use? We use the native, primitive, savage, aboriginals or barbarians, or we can call it as a indigenous people. Okay, these are the different terms we have it for the inhabitants. After this, settlers and the native shared a kind of the traumatic relationship. When we use these different terminologies, we have a question: what type of the relationship that this inhabitants as well as the settlers have? The answer would be they had a very traumatic relationship. What is the meaning of traumatic relationship? If someone disturbs your freedom, if someone disturbs your own culture, there arouses a kind of unhappiness. This unhappiness or unrest that leads towards the kind of relationship which is called as a traumatic relationship. So we have, next we have the question, what is colonialism? Okay, colonialism is an early exploitation of the weaker section by the powerful people. Okay, after colonialism, it's a kind of exploiting something by the people. Imperialism. Imperialism means extending a country's power and influence through colonization, use of military force or other means. Okay, what is meant by imperialism? That we are extending, we are showing our supremacy towards the inhabitants there, and the settlers, those who have settled in a particular land, no, they just looted and plundered everything from the inhabitants. They didn't return anything towards the native people. That's only we have a question: what is post-colonialism? Post-colonialism. So we have two kinds of people, as I said, no? that is, one is called as a settlers, another one is called as a inhabitants. These settlers, they wanted to reform, or they wanted to reframe the natives present in a particular land. So that's what there arises a post-colonial literature. What is this post-colonial literature? Post-colonial literature is an academic discipline and a theoretical structure that analyzes, explains and responds to the cultural legacy of colonialism and imperialism. We have a key connection between the colonialism as well as imperialism. So post-colonialism, which gives us a clear-cut picture about the life of the colonizers. Okay. It speaks about the human consequences of external control and economic exploitation of the native people and their lands. So what is this external control and economic exploitation of the native people and their lands? The settlers who have controlled their natives with the help of their power. Okay, the natives, they have their own culture, their own freedom, their own land, but they don't have a culture. They thought the settlers thought that the natives are the inhabitants. So they wanted to have a control over the native people. That's why there was a kind of economic exploitation of the native people and their lands. So this post-colonial literature is a new perspective to look into that. Next we have post-colonial literature rejects the dominant Western way of seeing and superiority of the Western culture. Next we have post-colonialism also examines the effects of colonial rule on the cultural aspects of the colony and its treatment of four main things. What are they? First is called as women, next is literature, then language, then we have the humanity. For example, we can get a kind of relationship that you have in the works of the post-colonial literature. When you look into the post-colonial text, we can get that what are the different writings came up with the different features that was produced by the post-colonial writers. Next we have the reality true is that world today is a world of inequality and much of difference falls across the broad division between people of the West and those of non-West. Post-colonialism, why post-colonialism emerged? Because in order to change the world or in order to give a new perspective towards the people or the natives, that's why we have the post-colonialism. Next we have a world that has been changed by a struggle. We cannot simply change a world. Why? Because we have to struggle a lot in order to change the people, in order to reframe the people. That's why I am saying that a world that has been changed by the struggle. Then it disturbs the order of the world. First it disturbs, then it settles and we'll get a fine literature. It's all about language and power and the identity crisis. We have in post-colonial literature, we have different types of languages that has been used to describe their own struggles. Then we can see the dominant power of the people. Next we have the identity crisis that has appeared. This is one of the major themes that you can get it in the post-colonial text. Next, it threatens privilege and power, reforces to acknowledge the superiority of the Western culture. Its radical agenda is to demand quality and well-being for all human beings on this earth. So we have far poses to acknowledge particular superiority of the Western culture. There we can get a numerous post-colonial text. Next, we have post-colonialism, what it addresses. Especially post-colonialism addresses the politics of knowledge. Next, the post-colonial identity of a decolonized people, which derives from the colonizers' generation of cultural knowledge about the colonized people. So we have, as I said earlier, when I start my class, I said we have the two kinds of people, the settlers as well as the natives. Here we have the colonizers' generation. They are just acknowledge about their own culture. Next, they colonize the people who are present in their native land, and how that Western cultural knowledge was applied to subjugate a non-European people, non-Western, lost their language, identity and culture. So these are the main issues that you can get it in the post-colonial literature: language, identity and culture. They lose their identity and they search for a new identity, and they are forced to lose their own culture and they have to adapt a new type of culture. So that's why we can call it as a third world literature. The third world is seen as a world defined entirely its relation to the colonization. Next, what are the main themes that we can get it in the post-colonial literature? The major themes of this native literature, we have the native people have written a kind of their own sufferings in the form of the books. Mainly, we can get the themes of suppression and slavery and dispossession, then search for roots, cultural fragmentation, colonial and neo-colonial domination, post-colonial corruption, crisis of identity. As I already discussed about what are the main themes. So these are the exclusively these native people have used these terms and they have produced different types of the post-colonial text. Next we have some of the writers who has presented their text. Who are they? First we have Francis Fanon. He is a psychologist as well as a philosopher, and imposition of a subjugating colonial identity or harmful to the mental health of the native people who were subjugated into colonies. Dehumanization is achieved with physical and mental violence by which the colonist means to inculcate a servile mentality upon the natives. Francis Fanon has written a book which is called as a Wretched of the Earth. Next we have the Black Skin and the White Mask. In that he discussed about the subjugation of the colonial identity. Next he talks about the mental health of the colonial people. Okay, the next writer would be, we have Edward Said. That he was born in 1935 Jerusalem at Palestine. He was a professor of literature at Colonial University and a public intellectual and a founder of the academic field of the post-colonial studies. Edward Said's book, which is called as Orientalism, that was a famous book that we can get in the post-colonial literature. In that he talks about the East-West dispute. So he is considered to be one among the chief exponents of the post-colonial literature. In the book, he said that you cannot continue to victimize someone else just because of yourself were a victim once there has to be. But this is a famous line that you can get it in the work which is called as the Orientalism. Next we have another writer who is called as Homi K. Bhabha. He has produced a famous book which is called as A Location of Culture. The theoretician, he was a theoretician and he argued that viewing the human world as composed of separate and unequal cultures rather than as an internal human world perpetuates the belief in the existence of imaginary peoples and places. The Islamic world, the first world, the second world, or we can call it as the third world. These are the different terms that Bhabha is using in the text about the post-colonialism or the post-colonial literature. Next we have the Dipesh Chakravarti. Dipesh Chakravarti is also another writer who belongs to the post-colonial literature. In Provincializing Europe, that was produced in the year 2000, Dipesh Chakravarti charted the subaltern history of the Indian struggle for independence and countered Eurocentric Western scholarship about non-Western peoples and culture by proposing that Western Europe simply be considered culturally equal to other cultures of the world, that is, as one region among many in human geography. In this book, in Provincializing Europe, Dipesh Chakravarti argues about what type of relationship that the East as well as the Western country has and how they have maintained their relationship, what are the struggles that they have faced, everything that he has discussed in the book which is called as the Provincializing Europe. Next we have he was a professor, academic, as I already told you about Homi K. Bhabha, that he has produced a famous book which is called as a Nation as well as a Narration. Next, another writer who is called as the Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, an Indian scholar, literary theorist and a feminist critic. Spivak also introduced the terms essentialism and strategic essentialism to describe the social functions of the post-colonialism. So this was a famous work written written by the Gayatri Spivak, Can Subalterns Speak? Is a prominent work to study post-colonialism exclusively. When you read this essay which is called as Can Subalterns Speak, we can clearly understand what is the meaning of colonialism as well as the post-colonialism. So thus post-colonialism establishes intellectual spaces for subaltern peoples to speak for themselves in their own voice and thus produce cultural discourses of philosophy, language, society and economy, balancing the imbalanced as and then binary power relationship between the colonist and the colonial subjects. So that's what we have as a colonial literature. Okay, that is a post-colonialism. It gives different types of subalterns people to speak about their struggle and produce their own discourses that they have. So that's it about the post-colonial literature. I hope you have enjoyed the session. We'll see you in the next class. Thank you.